Good evening. So thanks very much for joining us. Happy GAD. Thanks for joining us for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We've got a couple of fantastic talks lined up for you. Really excited about the agenda tonight. Before I hand over to them, I'm just going to do my usual thanks. So first off, thanks very much to User Testing for hosting us yet again. So I think it's been a few times now, so we can't be doing too much wrong. So thank you very much. Thank you to Hayley and the team. Tom is not able to be with us today. He's expecting his second bundle of joy. So Hayley has kindly stepped into the breach. So thank you very much at quite late notice as well. So. Yep, and thanks also to Alan. So Alan's here in spirit. Alan's our live streamer, so you can see some kit over there. He's here, not physically today. He's over in Glasgow, but he's managing the live stream remotely, and this is a first for us. So we hope it all goes smoothly. Unfortunately, if the speakers are not able to move very much because he can't move the camera, so. Yeah, if they're not as fluid as they might normally be, then that's why. And yeah, I think that's probably it. Obviously, huge thanks to our speakers tonight as well. So we've got Rashmi, who's going to be up first speaking, and Duncan and Keith. And yeah, really looking forward to that. Before we go into the community announcements, we've got a couple of community announcements. I'm just going to hand you over to Hayley just to say a quick hello and a couple of notices.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I am Hayley from User Testing, and I don't normally help out with this. I stepped in to help out, and I'm sorry if anything has been a little chaotic or not up to Tom's usual standards, but we're trying, and I think we've got there. So just for the housekeeping, there are no fire drills or tests planned at all this evening, so if it goes off, please go for the door out there, follow the arrows, and head outside. And if you also need to go to the bathroom, this door should be open if you go through that and just take the first right. If it does get locked, you will need someone with a user testing card to let you in, so we'll try and keep an eye out. And again, if you're wanting to leave early, no judgment if you need to, try and grab someone and we will take you down and make sure you don't get trapped in the reception because you need one to get out also. But I think that's everything. Any other questions, please come see me. We also have Kerry and Nea helping out, who you may have seen on your way in. We hope you enjoy it, and we're happy to have you here at our office. Back to Mike.
Thank you very much, Hayley. Yep, so in terms of community announcements, we've got UX Scotland fast approaching very, very quickly, end of this month, so that's the 29th to the 31st of May. If you haven't got your tickets already, then it's a fantastic conference. There's 10% discount as well for UX Edinburgh members. If you're not a member of our Slack channel, I'll post it on Meetup. If you're not, you'll see the code there. So yeah, do take advantage of that. Our next meetup as well, we've got a joint meetup with People Planet Pint, and that's just we've just literally advertised that today. So that's on the 1st of June. That's a Saturday over in Belfield Brewery. So Saturday 1:30. Again, get yourself over to that. That's going to be that'll be a good one, I think. I think that's it from me. Although I'm going to hand over to Keith and Duncan just quickly. I think you've got your accessibility workshops, is it, that you're running at the moment? Masterclasses, sorry.
Masterclasses. Hello, everybody. I'm Keith. Nice to meet you. So we do have an accessibility masterclass webinar series that we're running at UserVision. They're all available to book in online, and they're all free events. So the next one coming up. Oh, I should have had this prepared. We do have past ones available on our YouTube channel. So we've got one on accommodating neurodiverse users online, and Duncan and I recently did one on persona power as well. Not only that, we have an accessibility video series coming out soon called Accessibility Unlocked, which we're very excited about. And the first one is about accessible labeling. Okay, so that's everything from me.
Magic, thank you, Keith. Right, let's move on without further ado to our first talk. So Rashmi, if you'd like to step up to the podium, if I can have a big hand for Rashmi.
Thank you. Thanks for all the intro. And it's great to be doing something for God this year. And thank God this room is full. It was good to see this room getting full and see all faces and many familiar faces. Good to see you all again. So my name is Rashmi. I'm a senior user consultant. I work with Accenture. And I've been working with NHS England over the last 2 years, helping them, advising them on not just usability, but in accessibility. That's not part of my role as such within the NHS. I went in there to do user research, but turns out nobody else was talking about accessibility. So I started talking about accessibility 2 years ago, and now their roadmap has changed. It's been quite a journey. So I will be sharing with you all things that I've been hearing every year, wherever I go with whoever client I work with, lots of perceptions about disabilities, about disabled people, and about accessibility. So I thought, why not talk about some of these most common myths that we hear about accessibility. We can roll our eyes or we can laugh at those perceptions, but by the end, we have to fight these battles every day in our work. So hopefully you're gonna get some insights and strategies and frameworks which you can take away and use it at your work. So that's what I'm hoping for. So who am I? So what's my journey been like? Many, many years ago, when was that? 2009, I started off in the area of graphic design, so I was a trained graphic designer back then. But I very immediately, my design school said, we are burying the graphic design department because everything is apps and web. I was like, all right. So that's how I landed my very first job in UI design, being the solo artist. Trying to work on a broadcasting suite for a company in France. And from there, I said, okay, we're doing all this, but I realized we are making a lot of assumptions as designers. We're making assumptions about the users, sometimes not talking to them. So I said, okay, why not step back and talk to users, talk to who these people are for who we are designing. So I ended up coming to Dundee. Of all places on the earth, Dundee was offering a master's in design ethnography. So there I was in Dundee in 2009-10, doing masters in design ethnography. And then fast forward after that, I worked for a year or two as an ethnographer, very much in field in India, on the streets, working for fast moving consumer product companies that like to sell you food, drink, coffee, and products. So trying to give companies insights about human behavior and what customer patterns are like. And that was an interesting stint. And then I came back to Scotland that next time as a UX designer. So that was my very first entry as a UX designer, bringing all those facets in my day-to-day job. So I'm very much interested also in storytelling, because it is not just about what we do as designers and researchers. End of the day, we have to communicate all of that, basically be able to say, this is not fit for purpose without offending anybody, right? So you've got to have friends. In our jobs, friends are very important. Sure, you all agree to that. And in the last few years, it was a conscious choice for me, because everybody asked me, are you more of a designer? Are you more of a researcher? I said, I have no idea. I don't know. I love them both. So I think I naturally did, in the end, gravitate more towards research, because I think that's what I get really fascinated with. And I started going much deeper into the space of accessibility as well. I'm very much self-taught in that space, simply because nobody was talking about the problems I was seeing. So most of what I've learned in accessibility is on the job and just reading and educating myself. So sorry, a little bit of marketing here. My company likes me to. say this, that I work for Next Gen Engineering. Next Gen Engineering is a part of Accenture. We sit within Accenture. So we see ourselves as the best of both worlds. We have boutique consultancies type of, setups who are agile, fast-moving. They very much have a presence in regional tech communities. And we've got all of that, plus we take advantage and we take all the nice things from Accenture about being able to deliver products globally, be able to reach into those talents and skills of people that are required to deliver in very niche areas to different clients. So we've got that deep industry experience, and we take advantage of the leading ecosystem partnerships with entities like AWS and the likes, Microsoft, all of that. So why should we make things accessible? There are lots of reasons. Maybe if you ask somebody else, they'll say, why we shouldn't make things accessible? And you can have a debate. So what I'm going to share here is all the things you can use to answer why we should make things accessible. You can say it's the right thing to do, but what does that mean, really? The United Nations said it is basic human need, human right to have access to information. Yes, it's true. Does that mean we'll do it? Not yet. Resistance. Okay, then you can say, look at us, global population. 1.3 billion people are disabled on our planet. Still, what does that mean? I don't know. I can't relate to anybody who's disabled, right? These are the sort of attitudes we come across, people who cannot see what it's like to have those experiences. If we don't have those lived experiences, it can be really hard to empathize, to see the struggle. And then, you've heard of the statistics from various places. 1 in 5 people in the UK have at least one or more disabilities. It is, in fact, people who have disabilities have more than one disability. So people who have disabilities, it's far fewer of them who have just one disability. And usability affects everybody. So accessibility, if you do accessibility right, it means you are delivering something, a service or a product, which is usable for everyone. And there's this thing about aging. I'm not so young anymore, and I can see deterioration in my vision and a few other things. So as we grow older, we are likely to develop more disabilities. And that is a natural process of aging. And do we talk about brand reputation with the clients we work with or the organizations we work with? What happens when somebody is trying to use the service that you put it out in public and they can't book appointments, they can't buy tickets? They're going to get frustrated, they're going to leave, they're going to go elsewhere, right? And it depends if they can find that elsewhere where they can complete that part of that journey or the goal. But then they're not going to come back to your product or your site to buy that thing again or to use that information because they've had such a bad experience. So it also affects revenue. It affects revenue if you are selling something, either subscription-based or a product that they can purchase right away. And there is this thing about future-proofing, that if you build your technology, if you build your product or service in such a way that it doesn't cater for accessible technologies to serve people with disabilities, to be able to use that service, then it is simply inaccessible. So when the time comes that when you have to change things, you have to do a lot. You have to basically rewrite the whole thing. And that is where things become very expensive and loaded. And that is the sort of burden people fear. And by being accessible, you are building better products. You're going to stand out from your competition. And search engines, such as Google, they optimize websites that are more accessible. So you're more visible, you're right on top if you have a website that's more accessible. And it's a legal requirement. I like to say this at the last, it's not the first, right? The problem by putting legal requirement right at the first is it sort of becomes a checkbox exercise. But that's not why we try and deliver accessibility. That's not why we try and make services accessible. And last of all, yes, by doing all of this, you would have a clear advantage over your competitors in that market. So there are different ways of viewing the world. Some of you may be aware of the medical model, social model. There are lots of other models, but I like to juxtapose these two. They are like opposing forces. Now, the medical model of disability, sorry about that. Get that out of my way, right? I move a lot. The term medical model of disability, it was coined by a psychiatrist, a guy named Dr. Saz. Not sure I'm pronouncing that right. Sometime around the mid-1950s, and he did that to critique the emerging psychiatric practice at that point, and practice of defining mental conditions as illnesses and treating those new diseases with medications. So there came a thing called medical model. Now, medical model is where the person or the individual is seen as impaired. So the person is seen as a problem. So that's the attitude, right? So disability is caused by the person's impairment. And the focus is to cure, as the name says, medical. Now that is a very bad model. Do not use it. Right? Because it's not an uplifting model. Who does it uplift? Who does it empower? Nobody. Instead, let's take a look at the social model. In the social model, which was created by disabled people and for disabled people, people are viewed that not as disabled, but that they are being disabled because of things in their environment that makes it impossible for them to access information, service, things in general. So there is a certain attitude here. The attitudes, there is stereotyping, right? So there is stereotyping in saying disabled people are of a certain type without really understanding them. And in this model, the environment is seen as the barrier, not the person with disability. And mostly in organizations, you would find that the procedures don't accommodate for everyone's differences or needs. The processes are pretty inflexible. It caters to people who don't have a disability, but if you have a disability, there is no option. So given that there are different ways of viewing, and what is more an empowering way to view the world, and despite so many decades of YCAG being there, WebAIM being there, despite advancements in the understanding about disability, about technologies, we still have people's perceptions that are so incorrect, right? People have these perceptions. It's coming from somewhere. It's not coming from personal experiences. It is coming from prejudices, preformed prejudices. And what could be the reality? So that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on 4 myths that we so frequently hear, and what's the best way to overcome those myths. So myth number 1, how many of you have heard this? Accessibility is only for people with disabilities. Okay, yeah, quite a few hands went up. So, and how do we overcome when somebody says we should accessibility is only for people with disabilities. There aren't that many of them. So the thing with inclusive design is it views disability as situational, temporary, permanent. So when people think about disability, they are often thinking of the very last category, their permanent disabilities. So what constitutes situational and temporary disabilities? So situational disabilities is a situation that occurs in your life, could be a brief period, where you are disabled because you're carrying one child on your hands, and you have one hand available, and you're driving a bus. You've got to have full concentration. If you have a dashboard in front of you, that dashboard's got to be well designed for a person who has to look at the road and also look at the dashboard, and also has to look at the rearview mirrors. And what about a stressed person? I've had a very stressful day. I couldn't see a button that was right in front of me, and it was big and green. That's what stress does to our minds, to our brains, right? We don't see what's right there in front of you. And yes, our design has to be, it's something that should work for a stressful a person who's stressed. And another example of a bartender who's working in a noisy bar. So it's like having low hearing, right? So when I talk to Siri at home, it has a difficulty in understanding my accent. Some apps are worse than others. And it's quite a comedy. I ask it to play a song, and then it gives me something else. It's like, all right, I'll listen to that. What about low IT literacy? Should we consider that as a situational disability? Somebody having low IT literacy because maybe of certain situations in their life, could be lack of exposure due to maybe educational circumstances, could be financial circumstances. Now that again could be considered a situational disability. And temporary disabilities we can all relate to. Woke up with a wax in your ear and half deaf, right? My eyes are hazy today because I had little sleep. So my vision's worse than normal today. And what about women who are going through menopause or perimenopause? It impacts their memory pretty badly. Just last week, I was doing a series of usability test sessions, and I had a participant who said she was going through perimenopause, and it so happened that what we were testing, she had to go into a secure environment, and it asked her to log in twice. She had such a bad experience because perimenopause affects memory. You don't know what that thing is called, that tool is called, but that tool's password is there in LastPass. Now, how can I find that in LastPass? She went through an enormous stressful experience of trying to enter her password the second time. Do we consider these things when we are building secure systems, ultra-secure systems? In often case, unfortunately, security just totally trumps accessibility. That's been my experience. But in reality, or in theory, when people procure tools, when people design secure IT solutions, they are meant to consider, and that is part of their principle, to consider that the tool is accessible or the solution is accessible. But again, that's theory. So let's keep talking about it until theory becomes more of a practice and we start seeing more of those evidences around us. And permanent disabilities is what we are all more familiar with, right? Somebody developing dyslexia, somebody being partially deaf or fully deaf, and somebody having amputated arms or limbs. Blind, you can be blind to various degrees. It's very rare that a person is so blind that they can see nothing. They can see degrees of light and shade, forms, patches. So myth number 2, our product users are not likely disabled. I got this like 2 years ago. I was told this when I entered a project. I was like, is that right? We're going to be asking them to pay a subscription. It's going to cost them thousands. So are you sure? So how can we give them that evidence that, no, given that there are 5 people in the room, there's going to be one, at least one, who has some disability, and that's what statistics show us. How many of you have seen this on the Department for Education? It's quite a clever tool. You can simply, enter a number of users that your product or service is targeted to reach. Is it the whole country? Is it a niche population? Okay, I put in 100 people. So for 100 people, it said 77 of them have vision problems. Now this is based on data in the UK. And that includes blindness, lower poor vision, and other conditions like cataracts. And that's a high number, I would think. So even given a room of 5 people, you can't say, no, our users are not going to have any disability. It's unlikely. So let's carry on. Why bother? Let's give them the evidence. Myth number 3, accessibility is too expensive and time-consuming. How many of you have heard this one? More hands going up this time. Yes, I hear that all the time. I've been hearing that for years. And how do we combat that? Because that's a really hard one. It's a really, really hard one. There are a couple of things we can work, but they are not short-term solutions. So one of it is, yes, it requires it requires a change in strategy. And this strategy is to adopt the shift-left model in the world of software. Since we work a lot with software people, developers, and the whole product team, engineers, architects, we have conversations with them. We involve them in the work that we do, because if we don't, they don't really see what we are talking about. We are talking a different language. Because we often complain about engineers, hey, what language are we talking in? I don't understand a thing of what you're saying. Can you say that in human comprehensible words? They say the same thing about us, right? So it's very important we involve these tech people, engineers, developers, architects, invite them into your usability test sessions. Let them observe how users are using the service that we are creating. So in the traditional model of software development lifecycle, things are done a certain way. Like there's that whole order of doing things. You gather requirements, you implement it, you test it, and then you maintain. But in the shift-left model, you do all of that much earlier. Why? We do this because it saves you a lot of time. It reduces costs massively. So interestingly, this model is not a new model. It's been around since 2001. A guy called Larry Smith coined it, the shift-left method. And it's used in design, it's used in software development, it's used in accessibility testing. So it's called DAM. So DAM is a big part of, DAM is something else I'll be talking about later, which is accessibility maturity model framework. That is part of the shift-left methodology. And the whole point is you test early and you test often. You do not wait until your software is ready and packed, right? Because then if you start finding trouble with it, you'll have to uplift the whole software. And it's a lot of work. And that is why, precisely, they say, yes, it is expensive, it is time-consuming. In that approach, yes, it would be. So this shift-left approach is found to be very effective approach for software testing, for system testing. It's performed much earlier in the life cycle. Multiple tests can be automated in parallel without having to wait. And it prevents problems from recurring. And you're not waiting until the end to fix them all. So basically, you reduce the time. It gets shorter between releases. And your software quality is much improved. The other strategy that I do like for combating that myth on we don't have time and we don't have budget is It's a long-term goal. It's a long-term solution. It's not going to give you results, not even in a week, not even probably in half a year. It takes time, but it's something we should be doing. It's called the Digital Accessibility Maturity Model. In short, I will refer to it as DAM. And it is a method to measure where your organization is right now, as how mature is it for delivering accessible services, products. So there are various levels. There are 5 levels in this to one measure, and then once you have a measure, you can start growing into these higher levels. So the first level, which is the very, very bottom of the levels, and for an organization to be in level 1, things have to be pretty undocumented. Various procedures, processes, everything undocumented. It's inconsistent, it's not controlled, there is no single point of truth. And you might have just introduced some training starting. So that's you are at level 1 if you have done that. And you're in level 2 if now the organization, I was talking to Zazu, and Zazu said, yes, the company she works for now recognizes. So the organization recognizes the need for standard operating procedures to say that most of the services that we deliver should be accessible, right? And that has to be an organizational goal, because if it is not, you're not getting your friend to support you in that journey. And in this level, those processes that were set are producing somewhat consistent results. For example, a framework, which you say everybody must use. And are people using that framework? If they are, yes, they're producing consistent result, which you can monitor. And that would put you on level 2. And you're in level 3, which is where things are more defined now. It's a better level to be in. Quite well-defined accessibility processes, repeatable with demonstrated adoption across the organization. Say, for example, the company I work with, Accenture, we were all sent presentation decks, and we said, this is what we have to follow, right? And I found accessibility issues in it. So I went back to the people who own that, and I recommended, here are the issues we found, and we did that as a little team. And again, this is not part of anybody's job descriptions, right? But that's why we say accessibility is a collective responsibility, that we all need to raise these fires. The fires are everywhere, right? We need to talk about it. Otherwise, people are going to be walking over fires without knowing what's the damage it's doing. So you're getting increasingly consistent results at this level. And in level 4, which is quite high up, the organization is very actively managing all their standardized accessibility processes. They're monitoring metrics. They're monitoring how are things performing. How are people using things? How is it delivering results? And it is using that shift left model of starting the whole process much earlier. It is about considering accessibility much earlier in the planning, in the procurement, where design hasn't even begun yet, right? You are designing and reviewing. So it begins much earlier. And it is sustaining an inclusive best practices for the organization and for external customers. And level 5, which is like the wow place to be in, we all desire to be in level 5. But if we don't record where we are, we don't know where we are going. So in level 5, you're continuously optimizing accessibility processes by monitoring, but you're also coming up with innovative solutions, improvements. You have an inclusive culture, and accessibility is part of the organization's wider deal, like how should we do things. It's talking right there. It's talked right. It should be talked right at the top, and it promotes accessibility as a very active. It's an activism. So they promote it openly outside. So so that maturity model it's got various dimensions. Think of this as mosaic tiles. So there are various attributes here. These dimensions is what you would be measuring against. So on the next slide, I will share how we can go and measure against all these attributes. Like culture, like how can you measure culture in your organization? Are there data points that would tell you things about behaviors, sensitivity, attitudes towards your fellow, sorry, I'm not finding the word, but you know what I mean, people you work with. How are people interacting with each other? And what is the perception that that an organization has towards people who are neurodiverse, people who have learning disabilities, people who are disabled in one way or another? And how are decisions being made? Are people being involved? Are diverse people being involved in decision making right at the top? So that is where you can measure cultural processes and how things are working in the culture space. So in communications, any sort of communications that goes out internally to the organization, to the employees, and externally to customers, it has to be inclusive, it has to be accessible. And you work within an organization. Does the organization provide active help, support, assistance, both for internal employees and for external customers? You can measure against that. And is the organization attempting to give any sort of training for people in accessibility, basic accessibility, technical accessibility, accessibility for design, accessibility for testing? So there are various areas that you can go deep within and impart that training. Are there training materials? Are external vendors involved in giving those training materials? And what about personnel? Job descriptions? Is it inviting to somebody who, does it make you feel included? Does it talk openly about you won't be discriminated if you disclose that you have a disability? The sad truth coming from statistics again, people who disclosed that they had a disability at the point of applying for a job, unfortunately had 50% or more than 50% less responses of being called back. Right? How open are we to not only communicating it, but actually living it, right? Following what you preach. And how are recruiters recruiting people in your organization? And are there disability-related employee resource groups who can give that lived experience, so who can demonstrate that lived experience and also support? And there's the development life cycle where software and hardware considerations are made to ensure that you are being accommodating for various needs out here. And procurement, so many times I've been put on into projects where a very archaic tool or technology was procured, and now everybody is stuck in that for 5 years. Everybody knows that it's bad, it's not fit for purpose, but nothing can be done because we are in a locked-in period, and you can't get rid of that technology so soon. So that's where procurement, you can ask questions about, while procuring tools, or when you enter a project space, ask what technologies are we working with, what are we up against, what are the barriers here, what does it not allow us to do? So I've been on projects where we couldn't even deliver basic heuristics, like forget accessibility, YCAG, dozen, 50, 100 things that you need to get done. But if you can't deliver some of those basic 10 heuristics, how bad is it? So yeah, that's all those dimensions, and how do you rate, self-rate? So it's a self-assessment that you can do for your own companies or for your clients' companies. It gives you a point of reference and from where you can grow. The myth number 4, I come across this a lot. So it's the notion that if you do accessibility testing using automated tools, you've done it. Yes, we can push this into public beta, no problem. There. Is that right? Right, so there's a very good blog here from accessibility blog on Gov UK. I've shared a list of resources all on the last 2 slides, so you can take a photo of. So all these things are referenced in the links you can visit later. So all accessibility tools out there, automatic tools, they are anything but they're just a starting point for you. I've got screenshots here of a few different ones. Like I've got Wave open there, Wave panel showing some of those errors. YCAG color contrast checker. I've got A11Y app that is mapping the tabbing order, Tab Alley. Yes, that's got Tab Alley. So I've got that one. So these are all like all right, but when I do automated testing and then I do manual testing, I find so many more problems all the time. And then it's still not enough. It's always eye-opening when I sit and test it moderated with somebody with disability, or a range of people with a range of disabilities. It's always eye-opening. And those automated tests are not going to catch that. And there are several examples of where a UI can be 100% accessible in code, and we will say, no problem, zero errors. But if you look in there, right, you will see it's not even inclusive. Let me give you an example. You have a little drop-down menu, and it's a gender one, people's favorite. So it says, okay, select your gender. It says male, female. Anything else? Sorry, no. Is it an inclusive option? No, it's not. If you're not a male, if you're not a female, you have no option. You can't even say, I don't want to say. Where's that option? Right, none of it. Okay, so you can be accessible, but you may not be inclusive, and your automated tools are not going to flag that. They're not going to flag several other issues that come up when people with disabilities are sitting and trying to use your system that you've designed, because lived experiences are far more complex than AI can help you with, or these tools can help you with. So given that UK.org have tested so many different tools, and the best tools they found was only as good as finding 37% of the problems, accessibility problems. So yeah, use them as your first level. So I will move on to my very last section. Hope I'm doing okay on time. Okay, so avoiding common pitfalls. WebAIM's 2024 report came out on the accessibility of the top 1 million homepages, homepages with the most common YCAG failures. And the figures were slightly different from the last report I had seen. Does anybody want to guess? So which of these? We've got empty buttons, we've got missing form input labels, missing alternative text, missing document language, low contrast text, empty links. So which of these do you think came out as the most commonly occurring YCAG failure? Any guesses? Alt text, is it? Okay, let's go with alt text. Turns out it was that. Low contrast text, right? And how easy is it to fix your contrast, right? And does it take more time? Does it take more money? Right. And yeah, you're missing alternate text. Again, I like to make a point on automated tools. A lot of YCAG principles, which AA or A or AAA that you are committed to deliver, there is a certain amount of subjectivity involved in it, because you read the principle and how it's supposed to work. And say, for example, missing alternate text, right? They say, okay, decorative images don't need an alternative text, but that is subjective. Is the decorative text adding any more context? is that something a visually impaired person would like to know? It's not about need to know, would they like to know? Would it enhance their experience? Now, this is where your own subjectivity comes into play. It's not black and white at all. So your automated tools are not going to help you with from that perspective. So missing document language, what happens when a lang attribute is missing in your code? So the screen reader will simply read the default language that your computer has been set in. So the problem is, if you speak one language, it's fine. But what if you are a multilingual person? You switch between Spanish and English. Yeah, I've got friends who switch between Spanish and English. They use both. They use Spanish websites, they use English websites. What's their preference, right? So so think from that perspective. So lang attribute, it's such a simple, it's one line of code stuck at the top of your HTML page, right? Empty buttons. You have buttons with no labels, empty links, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't land anywhere at all. And missing form input labels. What is the screen reader, how's it gonna behave? Somebody trying to listen. They have no idea what to enter in this field. That's not nice. That's not a good experience at all. I defer. I really, oh my God, are you seeing this? No, you're not seeing this. Good. My company wants me to reboot my laptop, and I said, no, thank you. Damn it. Right. So YCAG 2.2 guidelines that came out October last year. YCAG 3 is still work in progress. It might be quite a while until version 3 is done, but for now what we have is 2.2 version of the guidelines. I highly encourage, it could be quite overwhelming to begin with if you start there, but what I really, really found nice about it was going into understanding each of those requirements. So there's an understanding section, and there's how to meet them, how to meet that criteria. And there's a lot of visual examples, they have code examples, and it's not prescriptive, it is more suggestive. There are more than one ways of delivering those solutions, right? JavaScript, you can build accessibility within your HTML code, but that's pretty basic. And if you want something beyond that is when you put it in JavaScript. So there are various examples of how to do it using ARIA, for example, ARIA labels. So even if you don't write front-end code, I don't write front-end code, but because I'm looking at code, I'm inspecting code a lot of the times for the pages that I see, what's wrong. So it's good to see what's missing in that code. So that's where I find this documentation helpful. And these are my personal recommendations. Accessibility is definitely not an afterthought. It is not a checkbox, because if you're gonna do that, then it becomes that big uphill task at the end that nobody wants to deal with. Definitely encourage you to take away and measure the maturity level within your own company or the client that you're working with. Always invite your stakeholders. Get your product owner to sit on one of your test sessions with your customer user, right? Get them to watch, because we had one such very, very, very painful sessions to watch. 1 hour of absolute misery, a person who went through nightmare, hell, stress. And it's because the PO saw it, she is now completely convinced that her roadmap needs to be acting quicker, right? I've been saying this for a year, but allow yourself time, don't try to rush. Sometimes things take time to change. It's taken 2 years for me to change that roadmap. Basically, I said it doesn't deliver at the beginning 2 years ago, and now it's ended up as a new roadmap where they're ditching that technology that doesn't deliver and moving to tools through which we can achieve good usability, good accessibility. And within your own spaces, involve people with disabilities in everything that you're doing. And I've personally learned a lot by engaging with them. If there's a neurodiverse community in your workplace, go join it. Hear from people. I have found it very educational for myself. And think about training, because accessibility is not a task you can take on alone. no matter how much training you take, no matter how much you can never do it alone. So always train as much people as you can, delegate, but champion it, and take small steps, take improvements in small stages. Work with your PO or PM in putting a roadmap, right? And you can definitely influence that roadmap. I've got some resources if people want to take photographs of this. I've got 2 pages of resources. These are really good resources based on which I put out a lot of facts, but also very interesting reads. And there's quite a few here as well. The very interesting one, if you go into the click away pound report, there it tells you the percentage of people who click away from websites that have not been accessible, what is the spending power of disabled people in the UK. There is an actual number to it, which is quite a lot of £1 billion. And imagine, if people are saying, I don't have time and money, right, to deliver an accessible service, they don't even know how much revenue they are missing out on. So show them these figures. Use the data that we already have. And some of the imagery I used is from Pixabay. They were free images. I liked them. Hope you did too. And it'll be good to connect with you all. So I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me or have a discussion, hang out. All right, yeah, thanks so much. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thanks very much, Rashmi. That was great. We'll take questions at the end, I think. We'll do questions all in a one with all 3 of you, if that's okay. So we'll just we'll move straight on to our next talk, which is Duncan and Keith. So yeah, if you just step up this way. Thanks very much. Oh yeah, if anyone wants to take a break, then please do. We'll just be a couple of minutes. So Alan's been in touch. Apparently.
All right, thank you everyone, and yeah, thanks Rashmi for a wonderful talk. And it's yeah, great to be hearing some of the things you were saying about yeah, really in-depth stuff, fascinating insights into accessibility, and also interesting about this, I guess, the intersections with, you know, how it can sometimes be applicable to everyone and how it's important to everyone. And we're at a UX Meetup talking about accessibility. So this is an interesting piece of work that we've done at UserVision, which is kind of we're talking about this technique called perception, cognition, action analysis, which is actually an old school usability engineering technique that's quite, has been around for decades, is not necessarily very well known. But what we found through this work we did with one of our clients over the past year or so was doing this work alongside some of the accessibility work that our accessibility team were doing. Really interesting to see the ways in which those approaches, the kind of old school usability approach and the accessibility approaches, really strengthened each other to help our client build a really strong, rich picture of what was going on with our product. My name is Duncan Stephen. I'm Principal User Experience Consultant at UserVision, so I've been working in user experience and related fields for about a decade. My background is in social science. That's basically how I got interested in user experience. So that's why this topic interests me, because PCA analysis is kind of based on a kind of simple psychology idea that we can apply in you know, how products are used. So yeah, that's what I'll be focusing on, and I'll be sharing the stand with Keith.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith. I'm the Principal Accessibility Consultant at UserVision. I've got a decade of experience as a sponsor skateboarder, actually. So, but my background at UserVision has been working in accessibility, working with clients in public sector, third sector, and private sector, helping them embed accessibility, essentially. So, doing accessibility audits, conducting usability testing with people with disabilities, delivering training to multiple diverse stakeholders, designers, developers, managers. And recently as well, we've been involved in conducting accessibility maturity audits, Rashmi. So lovely to hear that you've already done a wonderful intro. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. I'm going to pass back to Duncan.
Yeah, I gotta say, honoured to be sharing this session with Keith as well, who's a man in demand on a day like Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And not only do we have similar job titles, we look similar, we're the same height, we're similar age, we also have similar home lives, because we both have babies who were born within weeks of each other. So I'm going to start by talking about a medical device that's very dear to my heart at the moment, which is this digital thermometer. So yeah, I've got two kids now. One of them's 3 years old and one of them's 3 months old. So if one of them wakes up in the middle of the night, or perhaps sometimes both of them wake up in the middle of the night, and they might be screaming, I might be worried about their health. I need to take their temperature. And that can be a really tough situation, quite stressful. If I've been woken up at 2:30 in the morning by a screaming toddler or a screaming baby, I'm still half asleep, I'm not thinking straight, I'm panicking, it's dark, and I need an answer fast because I'm really worried about the health of my kids. And there are all sorts of things about that situation and that environment that would make it easy for me to make a mistake. And if I make a mistake around the healthcare of my kids, that could have serious consequences. So that's a really worrying situation for me. But the way this thermometer has been designed helps set my mind at ease. Because it's been designed in a way to help prevent me make an error. Which in turn, stops me making a hazardous decision about the healthcare of my children. So how does the design of this thermometer help prevent hazardous situations? That's what the Perception, Cognition, Action framework is all about. And it helps us understand how to avoid hazardous situations. Why does it matter? Research has shown that 71% of medical device faults arise at the design stage. So yeah, if you're a designer, it's our fault. These problems are on us. You know, we need to be doing a better job at this. And regulators are onto us, right? Regulators are demanding better, and they have been for a while, actually. So back in the year 2000, the US FDA, for example, started explicitly recommending that medical device manufacturers should incorporate usability engineering into their processes. And gradually over time, their recommendations have become a little bit clearer and a little bit stricter. So in 2016, for example, they first mentioned or explicitly included the PCA model that we're talking about today. And this is intended to help manufacturers clearly understand how they can do it. So how, not just do usability testing and not just involve users, but actually how to do it and how it can improve your designs. And over time, that's become an international standard, or part of an international standard. So IEC 62366 is a riveting read, one of my favorites. This is an international standard specifying a process for manufacturers to analyze, specify, develop, and evaluate the usability of a medical device as it relates to safety. And yeah, it includes this PCA analysis that we're talking about today. So yeah, what is PCA analysis then? So it's this flowchart. There's quite a lot going on there, but actually, when you break it down, it's actually relatively simple. And there's two sides to this story here. So this is basically this whole diagram is a representation. It's a model of what's going on in a user interface. And the two sides are, there's a user side and there's a device side. So I'll speak first about what's going on in the device side, because it's not really the focus of PCA analysis, but it's still an important part nevertheless. So in a device, it receives an input from a user, it then processes that input, and then it produces an output. So this is reasonably straightforward, kind of high school computer science stuff, input, process, output. Now, if something if something goes wrong in the processing of that input or the information that the system is working with, that can result in a hazardous situation in this model. So we can think of, there's a very high profile news story in the UK at the moment about postmasters being sent to jail because of buggy software that was fingering out people as looking like frauds, and hundreds of people were sent to jail. So in the context of medical devices, of course, the consequences can be even more severe than that. So it's a really important component of this model. And then once the device produces an output, it then sends something over to the user. It crosses that kind of user interface divide, and the user then has to perceive that this device is trying to attract their attention. So the device is doing something, and then it has produced this output, and then the user has to perceive it. And then once the user's perceived that they need to do something, then that's when cognition kicks in. So that's when you're thinking about, oh, what is it that I need to do? What's the device actually asking me to kind of do with this information that it's telling me? And then from that, you complete an action. And that action then gets sent back to the device as an input. So yeah, it's a reasonably straightforward loop, but it's still maybe a little bit abstract. So I'll just, using this thermometer, explain a bit about how you can apply this model and how you can use it to kind of break down the various features that exist in a product or in a device. So the sort of things that come under perception are, for example, things that you might see. So this thermometer that I love so much has a backlit screen with color-coded results that complement the actual temperature reading. It might be something that you can hear. So this device beeps, and it's got different types of beeps that tell me different types of things. And it might be something that you can feel. So for example, these tactile buttons are very lovely, and they help me know if I'm in the dark or if I'm holding a baby in one arm and the thermometer in another. If I don't need to look at something to know that I'm pressing a button like these wretched touchscreens that are everywhere now, but I can actually, believe it or not, press a button, feel it press down and push back up again on my thumb, and I know that I've actually initiated a temperature reading, which is magical. Things that come under cognition. So there are things like memory, for example. So if in the middle of the night I'm trying to figure out, is my child's temperature improving, that can be quite tricky for me to remember in the middle of the night or even at the best of times. So this device has a memory function, so I can look up the last 10 readings. So then I can know more easily, is my child's temperature improving or not? And that relates, by the way, quite heavily to a common usability heuristic about promoting recognition over recall. So we don't really want to ask people to remember things. We want to present them with the information so that they don't have to root through their brains and figure out what's going on. Things like rules about the way things work kind of come in under cognition as well. So, for example, you might not be aware, or normal temperature ranges depend on what your age is. So this thermometer has been designed in a way that it's impossible for me to take my child's temperature without first selecting her age from the three options that it presents me with. So that's really important for me in my recent context, where I've got one baby who's under 3 months old and another baby who's over 3 years old, because what's a safe temperature is different depending on what the age of your child is. And then general knowledge and sort of, our own knowledge, that kind of comes under cognition as well. So that could include things like our understanding of units. So for example, yeah, this thermometer, the photograph I've taken there, it's giving the temperature readouts in Celsius. Lauren Tormey, do you intuitively know if this is a safe temperature or not? Yeah, okay, the equivalent, yeah. But you would normally work in, or back when you were living in the States. Yeah. All right, okay, yeah. Very good. So yeah, luckily this thermometer has a function that enables you to, switch the units out. So if you prefer working in Fahrenheit, then you're good to go. I think they've actually not gone far enough, because any Google News users out there will know, or maybe know, that you can get the weather forecast in Kelvin. So I think if we're being really scientific about it, we should lobby the device manufacturers to include that option. So in terms of weather, 37.5, 99.5 Fahrenheit, they're actually the same temperature expressed in different units. Who knows if that's a normal temperature or a safe temperature? It depends on your age. Right. So that's a normal temperature for someone who's 3 years old or more. It's a high fever in a newborn. So this thermometer needs to be designed in ways that kind of help me sort of avoid that confusion, so that I know, I'm not making a potentially hazardous mistake about, is my child's temperature safe or not. So yeah, in this case, the backlit display changes color to integrate green for normal, amber for fever, red for high fever, complementing that digital readout. And I think it beeps differently as well, to help you know if it's dark, or if you can't see the difference between red and green. And then when it comes to action, so things that come under action are things like controlling a device, selecting things, entering data. So this might cover things like, can I actually press the buttons? Can I still use it easily if I'm holding my baby in one hand and trying to stick it in my 3-year-old's ear with my other hand? Do I have the motor control to use this eject button that removes this hygienic filter if I'm about to switch to taking another person's temperature on the same day? Not everyone might have the motor control to do that. So those are the sorts of things. That's how you can kind of break down the various features on a device or in a product across these 3 categories of perception, cognition, and action. So, and it's a chain of events, right? So you perceive some things, and then that becomes something that you need to kind of think about and understand, and then that helps you determine what action you need to take, that you then send back to the device, which goes in as an input, processes it, and then the output gets sent back to the user that they have to perceive again. So it's a cycle that goes round and round. And yeah, I've talked about the hazardous situations that can arise when there are errors on the device side, and there's an equivalent on the user side in that PCA chain. So if you make an error at any stage in that chain of events, that is classed in this model as a use error. And some of those the use error then goes back in as an input, and some of those use errors can create hazardous situations. So that's why this process is recommended for medical device manufacturers for you to follow. It's kind of focusing in on where in this perception, cognition, action chain of events is this hazardous situation arising? Where's the root cause? So to give an example, going back to the thermometer, if we focus in on one function, which is selecting age, in that process, first of all, in terms of my perception, the device beeps, and then it flashes to attract my attention, the screen lights up, and then these age icons fill. So what it does is it cycles through these, filling each of the icons in sequence. And so, I'm perceiving that the device is requiring my attention and is asking me to kind of, process this series of events, these signals that it's sending me. So then I have to understand it, and that's the cognition part. So I understand and interpret the meaning of those flashing icons to mean that I need to select the right age. So then I take the right action, which is to press the age select button so that I can cycle through the options until the correct age is selected. Something might still go wrong here, though, in my view, in terms of the design of this thermometer that I love so dearly. But despite that, I do think, what on earth is happening in the middle of the night if my 3-year-old's screaming and I'm having to take a step back and think, is she more than 36 months old? I've stopped working in months when she was 18 months, and then I need to do this mental arithmetic. It's a simple sum, right? 12 times 3. But it's not the sort of thing you want to be doing when you're panicking and stressed and it's the middle of the night. So yeah, that's that. In that case, you can say, right, the root cause here of a potential error there is, an error in my cognition because I couldn't do that simple math sum. Could lead to an incorrect action if I just quickly, because I'm panicking, just select another age just because I want to take the temperature. So yeah, that's a use error. And that in turn can cause a hazardous situation if I've been told that my child's got a safe temperature but she hasn't. So knowing where in this chain of events the root cause of that hazardous situation is arising is what informs designers, specifically how you can improve the design. And another key component of all this is understanding context, right? Because just what we all do when we're good user researchers is going out, speaking to people, seeing their context and understanding what's going on. So imagine your medical device is designed to be used by a patient, maybe in a busy public space. How does that inform the way that your device needs to be designed? And contrast that with how it might be designed for use by a medical practitioner in a relatively controlled environment, in a clinical environment. What might be different? So in terms of, and you can apply PCA to understand this a bit better as well. So in terms of your perception, if your device is just making a subtle beeping noise to attract attention, that wouldn't really work in a public space because the user might not perceive it because they're busy and it's a noisy environment. But it might be suitable for use or even preferable in a more controlled and quieter clinical environment. In terms of cognition, of course, when we're working with expert users, expert medical professionals, they're bringing a whole set of different capabilities to the table, a whole set of a different set of knowledge, let's say, different capabilities to what patients have. And that brings a whole other set of considerations around cognition to the table. And then in terms of, that has a consequence in terms of the way users might carry out certain actions might be different depending on their context. So going out and speaking to users and understanding their context use is a really important component of that. Right, what's all this got to do with accessibility? This is why Keith is here, so I'll pass to Keith.
Thank you very much, Duncan. So PCA and accessibility are intrinsically linked. But first, let's take a step back and see why this is important. Thank you very much for doing all of this already. So I will be touching on some of the content already covered, but I will skip through as much as possible. So folks, 1 in 6 people are disabled. Now this is a statistic from the World Health Organization, and this differs from the UK, where the statistic from the Department of Work and Pensions is 1 in 5. But in America, the stat is 1 in 4 people have a disability. So you can see that it drastically varies from country to country, and there are so many unrecognized disabilities or unregistered disabilities that impact many people, many people, 25% of the population in the US. And these are categorized in 4 different impairment groups. So initially we have our visual impairments. So these are people with blindness or low vision, or color blindness. We also have hearing impaired people, so people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Tinnitus is another disability associated to hearing impairments. We have motor impairments as well, so people with cerebral palsy, limited motor control, arthritis, all examples of users with motor impairments. And we have cognitive impairments as well, so neurodiverse people with learning disabilities, distractibility, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. And these are all examples of people that are affected in the way that they interact and engage with digital content. So folks, can I see a show of hands who is familiar with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? Oh, look at you. This is just the best audience ever. How many of you have read through some of the documentation? Oh, this is the best audience ever. Okay, so this is preaching to the choir. But we all know that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are the de facto standard in web accessibility. It's been developed by the Web Accessibility Initiative, who develop such standards as HTML, CSS, so they're the boffins to go to for this advice. The WCAG guidelines are technology agnostic, okay, so it doesn't just apply to web content, it also applies to wearable devices, TVs, all these sorts of things, so that's what we need to take into consideration when comparing it to PCA, okay? So we're currently on the latest version of WCAG 2.2, thank you. Rashmi, and interestingly enough, the first draft of WCAG 3 was released today. So if you want to go home and have a nice early night and tuck into the working draft, please, I encourage you to do so. So there are 3 levels of compliance when it comes to WCAG. Level A being your lowest level of compliance, your kind of minimum viable product. Level AA, which is for a lot of public sector organisations, the kind of standard that everyone's trying to achieve. And level AAA is your most enhanced version of accessibility, okay, catering to the widest possible audience and user group. In order to comply with level AA, you have to meet 55 success criteria. Now that's an awful lot of check boxes to tick. And if you want to comply with level AAA, there are 86 in total. And the way that the guidelines are broken down, we have the guidelines, we have 4 principles, which are then broken into 13 guidelines, and then broken into, I'm moving away from the camera, I'm just realizing that, I apologize. And then that's further broken down into your testable success criteria. The documentation, for those that are unfamiliar with it, is very inaccessible, we can say that. Difficult to read, but it's a fantastic resource for any designers, developers, product owners that want to learn more about embedding accessibility and making your products and services accessible. What was another little bit? So failing to comply with these standards could also have severe consequences for users with disabilities, and this is where we can see some crossover with PCA. But let's take a look closely at the 4 principles. Should have fixed those animations. So we've got they're broken into four principles. The first one is perceivable. Do I know something exists? Can I perceive it in a way that's meaningful to me and my abilities? The next one is operable. Can I interact with it and engage with it with my own input device, for instance? Can I operate it with a keyboard or a mouse? These are all sorts of things you need to consider. Understandable. Do I know what it means and can I act on it? Can I understand the information that's presented to me? Can I find things in a consistent way? These are all things that we need to consider. And finally, we have robust. Okay, so is the code clean and has everything been assigned a name, role, and a value? It's worth mentioning, folks, that the first 3 here, perceivable, operable, and understandable, are all centered around the user and their experience of being able to engage and interact with your digital products. And these principles serve as a framework for making web content more accessible to people with disabilities, ensuring that everyone, regardless of disability, can effectively use and interact with digital content. So, how is it broken down further? So, perceivable covers things like text alternatives, which Rashmi's already covered. Time-based media, so alternatives for video content, for podcasts, including captions, audio description, and transcripts as well. Making sure that it's adaptable, so create content that can be presented in different ways, including being used by assistive technologies. And we also have distinguishable as well, so ensuring that content has sufficient contrast and it's easy to perceive. The guidelines relating to operable consist of keyboard accessible, so ensuring that your keyboard users with motor impairments, your blind users can all access the same content as your sighted users who are using a mouse. Giving users enough time, so this comes for, if you think about any sort of timeouts on your system, ensuring that there is the capacity for the user to extend their experience so that they can complete the journey or the action within an allocated time. The next one is seizures. So we want to prevent any seizures. I don't know if anyone's familiar with lingscars.com. That's a sensory overload with lots of flashing images. And essentially the web content accessibility guidelines, seizures, 3 flashes or below success criteria is there to prevent you having and giving people seizures. The next one is navigable, folks. So providing clear and consistent navigation mechanisms. And finally, input modalities, so being able to interact with it using your mouse or cursor. Understandable, there's three guidelines relating to understandable, which are readable, to make text content readable and understandable. We have predictable, which web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. We have input assistance as well, which helps users to avoid and correct mistakes. And finally, we have robust, which has compatible, so ensuring that everything's been assigned that name, role, and value, ensuring that status messages are announced correctly to users, especially screen reader users. It's vitally important that we consider these factors when creating, designing, and developing digital products. Now, Duncan, can you please draw a tenuous line between these two principles?
Between the poor principles and PCA, yeah, sure. It's not very tenuous at all. It's a great aha moment. Come on, So we're doing this work with our client, which was Omron Healthcare, and we were doing this usability work, this usability engineering work, using the PCA framework, and at the same time, Keith's team was doing the accessibility audits, and we had a bit of an aha moment when we realized we were kind of doing the same things, but just looking at it through different lenses, because just looking at the core principles here in the accessibility work, I realized that perceivable was just like perception in the PCA model. Operable it's got a slightly different name, it's called action there, and understandable is cognition. And the robust part of the accessibility principles covers that kind of processing and making sure that everything is kind of running smoothly in the system. So yeah, just kind of seeing how the accessibility principles that I think are relatively well known in comparison with PCA, which is this kind of old school usability engineering that's kind of stuck in these international standards, actually really kind of strongly aligned and help strengthen the usability work and the accessibility work that sort of helped us build a really cohesive, rich picture of what was going on. So we're going to show a little bit about how this is all working in practice, and talk a little bit about this work we were doing with our clients, Omron Healthcare. So they were working on this ambitious multi-disease platform. So this is a platform that helps GPs who are managing a range of chronic conditions, including hypertension and heart failure, and patients also have an app that they can use to monitor their vitals and through an app and log their details, and that could then flag anything of concern to their GP. So Omron came to us to prioritize this in-depth understanding of both the patient and healthcare practitioner context and requirements, and asked us to do this work on PCA and accessibility for them. So some examples of things that we found in our work, and how our team's findings strengthened each other and helped Omron build a really rich picture of what was going on. So perception, hamburger menus. I don't know why we're still designing them, because anytime I run a usability test that has a hamburger menu in it, there's always at least one person that can't see the menu. And this is really important, right, in this app, because there's really important functionalities buried in this menu that some people couldn't see. Tell us about what the accessibility audit showed.
So it was all about the functionality of the element as well. So when a screen reader user navigates to that element, it's announced as collapsed. When the user actually activated that button, there was no feedback. So there was no, the change of content wasn't being announced to the user. So that's kind of relating to status messages. And again, as Duncan's mentioned there, if you can't see the menu, if you don't know the changes are happening, you might miss vital information, and you can't actually use the full functionality of the app, which is therefore hazardous. Yeah, so again, we've got another issue relating to perception, or perceivable. This is an issue relating to poor color contrast. As Rashmi's mentioned, one of the most common accessibility issues, and we can see here that the menu button is far below the requirement of 4.5 to 1. It's currently sitting at 1.6 to 1. That black text against that blue background. And again, all users do benefit from having high contrast. Viewing the app or the website on your device on a sunny day, there's going to be glare. It's going to be really, really difficult for you to perceive that content. There's more and more accessibility issues to uncover here, folks. So this one relates to one of the success criteria relating to the perceivable principle. And this one is that there's no programmatic association between form fields and related questions. So screen readers are effectively forced to do the work of finding out what each radio button or control relates to, okay, which is essentially a really cumbersome experience for these users, which will impact the way that they're actually using the service. And they don't know what the labels are related to, which is particularly important for blood blood pressure measurements.
Oh yeah, here's a more of a usability finding. So this is on the GP's dashboard where this lack of labeling meant that healthcare practitioners didn't know whether they were being asked to provide a systolic or diastolic reading, which seems pretty important. So yeah, maybe more of a perception thing. Right. Here's another cognition thing or issue that we found. Can anyone see what's gone wrong here? Yeah. What? Yeah. Unrealistically low weight there. So yeah, we saw this happening multiple times in usability tests, and we figured out that people either weren't seeing or didn't realize that they were being asked to supply their weights in kilograms, and they were providing the number that they think that is in their head, which is normally in stones. So people didn't even realize that they were being asked to provide their weights in kilograms, and we saw this time and time again. So yeah, people just being assumed to supply their weight in stones. And yeah, we might expect, I'm sure healthcare practitioners would expect to work with kilograms, and certainly our international colleagues working at Omron in the Netherlands certainly didn't expect to come across this weird concept of stones or cubic furlongs or whatever it is that we use here. So yeah, there we go. That was a lesson learned. Okay, here's an action issue here. So this is, believe it or not, it's meant to be a checkbox. It doesn't look like a checkbox. It looks more like a radio button. But a lot of people or participants in our usability tests didn't even think it was that. They just thought it was a circle, or they didn't see it at all. They just thought it was decoration. So this is meant to work like a checklist. So you're supposed to kind of tick this box to say, I've done my blood and urine test. But what people were actually doing was hitting those words, expecting to see more information and get more context about what they're really being asked to do. So yeah, and this kind of bolstered an accessibility finding as well.
Yeah, so this again ties into the labeling issue. It's announced to a screen reader user as unlabeled. Okay, and again, this is going to be hazardous to a blind user. Because it's unlabeled, they don't know the purpose of the reminder, and they could miss taking their bloods and urine levels. And the final one relating to action is relating to a keyboard trap that we discovered on the app. Now, this is a required form field, and when a keyboard user is navigating into this date picker to select their date of measurement, they were actually trapped in there. They weren't actually able to select the date. They weren't able to get out of it. Okay, and it's a required field, so effectively, it's a really big issue. Okay, they can't use the service at all. They can't move past this one screen, so it's a big issue. Having said that, there's a nice positive outcome. So we helped them with not only accessibility audits from my side, we also assisted with ad hoc consultancy, working beside their development teams and their design teams to come up with solutions on how to fix and amend these issues. Once changes were implemented, they then we were then drawn back in to conduct some further spot checks to ensure that the issues we've captured had been rectified and resolved. And Duncan, what happened in the UX world?
Well, yeah, I'll tie everything together, Keith. Don't worry. So outcome, so the product successfully launched, despite all some of those things those issues, like say that we have just talked about, seem in retrospect like facepalm moments. But this is why we do the work that we do, right? This is why we do usability testing. It's why we do accessibility work, is to discover these before they go too far, right? So it was launched successfully, and it was because we were able to show that they could make these improvements iteratively, and according to what we were seeing, the direct research that we were doing with users, patients, and healthcare practitioners, supporting and streamlining the ways of working of healthcare professionals, and capturing potential improvements to their platform. And Omron said that we identified user needs that went beyond its initial implementation. So yeah, the good news story is that all of the identified accessibility issues have been resolved, and the app is now fully compliant with WCAG, and Keith is very proud of the graph we're now about to show.
Drum roll, please.
Any words to say about that? Or
No, that's it. It speaks for itself, you know. Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. Sorry. So this was just a nice testimonial that our client gave to us, and I'm not going to read it all out, but I'm going to just highlight a few things because, I mean, one thing to note is that this was, I was saying earlier, it's like an iterative process, and it was seen that we were able to do this rapidly, which helped Omron kind of make steps in the right direction. And what kind of stands out to me about this is that the client from Omron sits there saying, we took people's concerns at heart, and they were surprised with the speed with which they were able to do so. So Omron's own kind of customers really kind of pleased to see how quickly we were able to implement this. And you were speaking earlier, Rashmi, about how sometimes the work that we do is seen as time-consuming or takes too long. But actually, if you break things down, use the right frameworks, and work in the right way, you can actually achieve really quick wins really quickly, just by working iteratively. Right, back to Keith.
Thank you, Duncan. So let's think about how we can go about managing accessibility and embedding accessibility. So using PCA analysis and an audit against WCAG is not the start and finish. As Rashmi's already mentioned, it's a process, it's a journey. This can give you key insights into how to improve your services and products. But again, we need to do it iteratively. Okay, and technical accessibility is only half the story. We need to make sure that our services are usable as well as accessible. Okay, so that's why usability testing with disabled people is so important as well. And our ultimate goal here is to embed accessibility across the organization and make sure that it's embedded in all of our processes from the kind of product inception to completion and delivery. So folks, Rashmi's mentioned the DAM model, the Digital Accessibility Maturity Model. Now, this is an ISO standard 30071 Part 1. If you want another interesting read, this is another great one. This is a code of practice for creating accessible ICT products and services, which was released in 2019. And it effectively helps organizations embed accessibility throughout the organization, which promotes inclusivity, compliance with legislation, like Rashmi's mentioned, it enhances user experience, it improves market opportunities, innovation, and employee inclusion. At User Vision, we have worked with the Digital Accessibility Maturity Model, much like the User Experience Maturity Model, and we have created a service called Digital Accessibility Maturity Audit, which involves things like stakeholder interviews, which from senior stakeholders throughout the organization, from various roles and roles and departments throughout the organization, coupled with questionnaires as well. So it was we amalgamated these results. We applied a scoring system to each of the questions, and then from there we could identify gaps in the organization relating to the following: strategy and culture, process and methodology, tools and technology, and finally people and skills. So using this methodology, we can pinpoint exactly which stage the organization is at in terms of their maturity. Now we've got fancy names for ours. It's not just level 1 to 5. It's aspiring to strategic to, it's great. You'd love it, honestly. As I say, embedding accessibility is the goal, and this is a fantastic tool to help you understand where you are, where your organization sits in terms of accessibility. What are the gaps? Do our teams need upskilling in accessibility? Do our designers need upskilling in accessibility? Do they know the standards that they need to know? Do our procurement team have policies in place to ensure that when engaging with a supplier, have we got the right requirements in there? Are the services that they're providing accessible? So folks, this kind of leads into all of the accessibility services that we offer at User Vision. I've mentioned quite a few of them. Accessibility audits to WCAG, the latest version of WCAG to 2.2, including the new success criteria. So there's 8 new success criteria that we need to know about. Then we also offer training for designers, for developers, for managers, courses on accessible documentation and creating accessible documents, and more recently, accommodating neurodiverse users as well. We also do usability testing with a wide range of users with disabilities, and we've also developed our own panel of disabled people that we can call on and use for the purposes of research, which is fantastic. We also have our accessibility maturity audits, which I've just mentioned there. We offer ad hoc consultancy, so we're again working with a range of roles to help them embed accessibility, to work with them to find solutions to fix accessibility-related issues. And finally, we have empathy workshops. Now, can I see a show of hands who's been to our World Usability Day at our Edinburgh office? When is that? Is that November?
Yeah, November, yeah.
It's in November. It happens every year, and the accessibility team are 9 times out of 10 are doing an empathy workshop. But we can also go to individual organisations, tailor it to make it more specific to their own environment and their own customer base. So, folks, I'm going to hand over to Duncan, who's now going to summarise everything.
Yeah, last slide now, don't worry. So yeah, in summary, yeah, 3/4 of medical device faults are on our shoulders, so designers need to be doing a better job, and regulators are expecting more. But international standards exist to guide us, so we've got the safety in medical devices, and we've got all the accessibility standards that underpin the work that we do. But yeah, it's not just about following the checkbox exercises. Speaking to users is really essential to understanding the context of use and what that means for our designs. But then applying perception, cognition, and action model helps us understand the root causes of issues, and applying POR and the WCAG principles helps us ensure accessibility for all, which also reduces the risk of hazardous situations in safety critical devices, which means happy patients and happy healthcare practitioners and happy clients. Thank you very much for your attention. Yeah, well, I guess we'll take questions now.
Thank you, folks. That was great. So I think we're running a little bit tight on time. We will be hopefully continuing over at Brewdog for questions if you're up for that. I've just got one question. Rather than opening up to the floor and just allowing maybe one person to ask questions, I'm going to turn to Gregor H, who has been listening in on the live stream. And Gregor says, great talks. If I could ask one question, it would be this. Why do you think that accessibility maturity is low in some large organisations, who would really benefit from a greater level of accessibility maturity? And I guess to put a positive spin on it, like, what can we do to change that?
Rashmi, do you want to take that?
That's an interesting question, but also a hard question. I've often wondered why the bigger the organization I've worked in, the deeper the problems are. And in my view, or in my experience, what I've seen is the priorities are laid somewhere else. Like the CEO of the organization is definitely not talking about accessibility, while rest of the parts of the organization are talking about inclusion. So there is inconsistency in the value to be delivered as an organization. If it is not an organizational goal, it's not going to be consistently delivered. And there goes procurement. Constantly people are procuring tools, investing in tools and technology that don't deliver for their own employees. People just sit and struggle and swear all day at work. It's destroying us.
And just to add to that, I think that we don't develop and design products with the intention of being inaccessible. It's a knowledge gap, and a lot of the time it's not out of ill intentions. It's just we simply don't know what we don't know. So if we can inform and educate, various teams, having an accessibility champions network throughout the organisation, having an upskilling program, training programs to help, individuals throughout the organisation understand the importance of accessibility. It could even be a kind of e-learning course in your induction. We've done that for one of our public sector clients, student loans company. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah, I just said it. Yes, it's knowledge, sharing knowledge, and ensuring that it's embedded in everything that we do is probably the best recommendation that I can give.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can I get a big hand for all our speakers today? And yeah, if you want to continue the evening on, we'll be off to next door to the Brewdog, and we can continue the chat there. Thank you very much. Cheers.